Hey, how's it going? Hey, so I've owned my Maverick Trail for a little over a year now. Thought it was time to do a year in review of this machine. I got a lot to talk about, so let's just get started. So first thing I probably ought to talk about, I've already done this video once. I did this video back in October when I had the machine for a year. It was about its anniversary. I was outside, beautiful sunny day. Sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so there's going to be a lot of going on here. But anyway, I've shot this video once already. Turned out great, beautiful. Went in to edit it, and it was just enough wind outside that the audio was just horrible. I mean, I couldn't put you all through that. So I just never had time to make another one with work and everything else. And now everything's cold and covered with snow outside, and so I had to wait till I had some garage space and blah blah blah, and I have a million excuses, but I am just getting around to getting this video done. So it's been more like 14 or 15 months that I've had this machine. I'm working off some notes here, but my notes are from back in October, so I'm kind of just trying to make do with them what I can and kind of sorted out what I had written down. And anyway, we're just going to get started. Another thing I want to mention, hey, we passed the 450 subscribers mark. I think we're more about 470 now. And I just wanted to take a minute to thank you all so much for subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot to me. When I started this, I didn't really expect a whole lot. And, you know, just the fact that 470 or plus of you give a crap about what I have to say and give a crap about what I do. I mean, it's humbling. I really do appreciate it. I really do. And you know, if you're watching this and you're not a subscriber, it's a piece of cake. Somewhere down here along the bottom, there's going to be a subscribe button. Just click it so you don't miss much. Not that I do much, but again, I just appreciate the subscribers. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Anyway, let's see if I can make the best out of my notes, and let's just freaking get started. How about it? So first off, I'm at 1,864 miles, and engine hours 133 hours 16 minutes. That's, I think I figured I'm at about, hold on, let me check my notes here. That's about an average of 14 miles per hour of its life so far. I don't know, just as a reference, I did the same thing on my ATV. I checked the miles and hours on my ATV, and I averaged 12.89 miles per hour. I don't know. I was kind of interested. I don't know. I was surprised that I averaged a little bit higher speed in this than I did on the ATV. And it may just be because when we're out on the flats, you know, when you're cruising along in this and 35 miles an hour, it doesn't seem so fast, but cruising along 35 miles an hour on an ATV seems a bit fast. So that's the only thing I can say to explain the difference, is that maybe out on the flats I go a little bit faster. But yeah, it's about 14 miles per hour average. And I do kind of want to point out before I forget that I average about 18 and a half, typically 18 and a half miles to the gallon out of this machine. I always forget to say that. At every video I've ever done, I forget to say it, so I just thought I'd throw it out there. But yeah, about 18 and a half. I mean, it's a little, I've had over 19 before, and I've had closer to 18 before. But yeah, on the average, about 18 and a half, which is about what I get on my ATV, my 850 Sportsman. So that was kind of an interesting fact, you know, I used to put fuel in 2 ATVs, and now put fuel in this, and basically cut my fuel price in half. So I get about the same mileage, but I carry 2 people in this instead of, you know, 2 machines carrying 2 people. Anyway, so of those miles, about 1,100 of them were put on the Paiute Trail this year. We went down in June for about 10 days. Went down again in August and did the northern section from Richfield up. I think we did about 300 miles or so that trip. And then we went back again in September for a kind of a long weekend. But altogether, about 1,100 of those miles are from the Paiute Trail. We did go to Rally in the Pines this year up in Salmon, Idaho. We put about 400 miles on it up there. And the rest of the miles have just been from local riding. I'm pretty fortunate. I'm just whacking the microphone with the thing. But I'm pretty fortunate I can literally just drive this machine out of my driveway and basically go that way. Give me about 45 minutes and I am up in national forest ground, and you know, so we put a lot of miles from just tooling around from the house. But I can drive right up, tool around for a few hours and drive right back home to my driveway. I don't need to trailer it anywhere. So yeah, the rest of the miles have been just put on locally. My record day was 133 miles. That's the most I've ever been in this machine in one day on one tank. That was one of the days that we were at Rally in the Pines. And the fuel gauge said empty, and the fuel light came on at about 100 miles, 105 miles. But it didn't take a full 10 gallons to fill it back up. The fuel gauge in in these machines, they're pretty notoriously inaccurate. Although I will say mine has become more accurate the lower I take. It's like almost like it's learning, which I don't know, probably not true, but the lower I take the tank on fuel, the more accurate the fuel gauge seems to get every time. But that's my record day. It was 133 miles. Then a few miles I've got a video posted, we did 102 miles, that was local. I did one day on the Paiute Trail that was about 103 miles. But yeah, you know, easily over 100 miles on a tank of fuel in this thing, no problem. So I think the direction I want to take in this, we'll talk about the evolution of this particular machine of mine, where it started from, what I've done to it since I've owned it. In the process, talk about some of the known issues that these machines have had. So I mean, if you're in the market for one of these, stick around. I mean, I'm gonna be throwing those out probably throughout. But yeah, if you're in the market, this should be helpful. So I changed the fluids on this machine pretty early on. I think before I went to the Paiute Trail in June, I went through and changed all the fluids, you know, the front and rear diff and the oil and filter and everything, just because I wanted to get a baseline of everything. I wanted to make sure all the fluids were good and full, you know, get the break-in fluid out, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with the break-in fluid, but mostly just so that I had a baseline. So I did that pretty early on in the season. I'll be doing it again, you know, the beginning of this season. This machine has been trouble-free. I mean, completely trouble-free for me. I did buy an extended warranty when I bought this machine, just because it was brand new production, new model, new year, new everything. I bought a 3-year extended warranty on it. Haven't had to use it, haven't had any problems with it. Yeah, knock on wood. A few things that, I don't know if you watched my Paiute Trail review video, I had a part where I hit a stick and cracked the footwell here. You can see this crack. The stick just kind of got picked up by the front tire, kind of went up in that little pocket up in there and cracked the footwell. The belly pans on these, the skid plates are weak. I mean, I haven't broke mine yet. I mean, that's the closest thing to a break I've had. I've seen shattered skid plates on these machines from people hitting rocks or hitting sticks like I did, putting them through the floor. I've been pretty lucky, all things considered, other than that crack. The first trip to the Paiute Trail, we bottomed out on a big old rock. I hit that rock really hard, and we didn't break the skid plate, didn't even crack it. I don't know how, but yeah, just driving over a dumb little stick that just happened to get picked up and wedged up in there. I don't know, it just happens. But yeah, the skid plates are pretty notoriously weak. I don't know, I've been lucky with mine. I think some of the biggest problems people have had, there was a wire harness issue. There's a couple of the wire harness to the throttle body wasn't routed correctly, so there was too much tension on the plug where it connects to the harness, or where it connects to the throttle body, causing all kinds of problems. That's fairly common. A lot of, I don't want to say a lot of people have had that issue, but several people that I know have had that issue. Another one was the spark plug wires weren't routed correctly, or they weren't secured right. So one of them would come undone or somehow make contact with the exhaust and melt through the spark plug wire, causing all kinds of problems. I know a few people that have had that issue. Those are probably the most common. A few people have complained, loose bolts, missing bolts, loose nuts, things like that. It's all pretty random. I have not had any of those issues. This is a really early production. This was the first machine that the dealer got on the floor. I think my serial number is like 230 or something like that. So it's a really early production model. And maybe they were taking extra care in the early models. I don't know. But yeah, I mechanically, I've been fortunate. Hold on. Yeah, mechanically, I've been fortunate with mine. The only issues I have with this machine are the tires. My first trip on the Paiute Trail, I killed the tires pretty harshly. I almost consider it a defect only because the tires are so bad. If you're in the market for one of these, just do yourself a favor and put some decent tires on it right off the bat. I was at, let me look at my notes here, 735 miles. I put the Tusk Terabyte tires on. I did a tire reveal right after I put them on. But just for comparison purposes, so this is the stock tire. This is the Carlisle ACT. And we're comparing rear to rear here. This tire has 735 miles on it. And you can't see without air in it when it's swelled up, but all of the tread is cracked right down in here. Every one of the tread blocks are cracked. And you can see there's chunks missing. Yeah, I'm not very happy with these tires at all. I pretty much destroyed them. And like I say, I had one that's got 2 plugs in it, and they're so dang soft that I couldn't get the plugs to hold in it. But just out of comparison, this tire has 735 miles on it. This tire has 1,125 miles on it. You can see the tusks are wearing really well. A little bit of rounding on the leading edges of the tread, but all in all, the tires are doing really well. Over 1,100 miles compared to 700 miles. And yeah, not a fan. And now they do look quite a bit different size-wise, but when these had air in them and these didn't, there wasn't as much of a difference. I mean, these look teeny now, but when these were aired up and those weren't, those were still maybe a half inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch taller. Tires are my only real complaint. They're just garbage. Yeah, if you buy one of these, just put some other tires on it. I don't care what you buy, but these Tusk Terabytes, these are a 27, 9, 12 all around. They've been an amazing tire. No complaints. They're wearing really well. They handle really well. I do have a video if you want to go watch it, the review of this tire. There's also a reveal video I did of this tire that explains why I bought this size, why I bought this particular tire. The evolution of this machine, when I bought it from the dealer, it was completely naked. There was nothing on it at all. And at the time, the only accessories even available for it were from Can Am. I mean, there was literally no aftermarket support for it at the time. So I brought it home naked, and I ordered a bunch of stuff from Can Am. When I bought it, I bought the front rack, I bought the corner guards, I bought the brush guard, the winch. It's the Can Am winch by Super Winch, 4,500 pounds, I think, synthetic rope, and the wire harness for it. And I bought the Bimini top, which I do not have on here anymore. We'll get to that. And that's pretty much how I drove it for the first couple of 100 miles. I had an old Polaris bag in the back that we haul coolers and stuff in. But that's pretty much how we put the first few 100 miles on it. One of the first real modifications that I did is I put this little 12-inch light bar here on the front. It's an aux beam 12-inch light, really inexpensive and a really decent light for trail riding. Not something you'd want if you were out in the desert or anything like that. It's not that kind of light, but for trail riding, it's more than adequate, and it's really good light for the money. But that was my first, modification other than the factory stuff that I did to the machine. And at that point, I did my initial walk around video. I'll put a link to that up at the top. I was pretty gung-ho about the machine then. Had a lot of plans and everything else and delusions of grandeur at the time. But that's when I did my first walk around. And I say that's how I put the first several hundred miles on the machine. Once we got a little break in the weather in the spring, started dinking around with it. I messed around with the sway bar. I took the front sway bar off. That's still probably one of the best modifications that I've done to the machine. I put the mud flaps on it here. That's got that idea from one of the Facebook page members. That's a modification I tell everybody to do. $13, O'Reilly's, buy that flap. I mean, these tires, where they sit so far back, they just chuck mud up, and the back of your helmet, on the steering wheel, you name it. I mean, they just chuck mud, and that really, really, really helps. I don't get a whole lot. I mean, now and then I don't get a whole lot from the sides. I mean, even though you can see quite a bit of front tire, I just don't have a whole lot of problems from the sides. So this has helped the majority of the mud, as these little flaps. While we're kind of on the throwing mud thing, these Terabyte tires, they are just the perfect gap. They will pick up rocks inside the tread, and they will just huck them. I mean, it's pretty amazing. They will huck it. You're just driving along down a gravel road, and a tire, once in a while, a rock will flip straight up in the air. But man, they just go flying out in front of you there. But they pick up rocks and huck them. But haven't had a lot of mud, a lot of splash, a lot of problems from the side. It's just been the back. That mud flap has cured the majority of that. And shortly after that, I got the RIFAB box. Still, I mean, I stand behind that box 100%. That is such a great box. It's completely sealed. It's dust proof, and just a really well built box. Still love that thing. And that, with that setup, is when we went to the Paiute Trail in June. And I was, we'd spent a lot of time down there, put a lot of miles down there on our ATVs. And I was going to go down and I was going to kick the Paiute Trail's ass with this machine. And I kind of got my ass handed to me a little bit. I did a post Paiute Trail trip review. I'll put a link to that up at the top. I kind of got my buzz killed just a little bit. I really had to relearn how to drive, how to take the trails, how to navigate turns, how to navigate obstacles, how to avoid rocks. And I mean, we bottomed this machine out. We beat the crud out of this machine. We destroyed the tires. I came home with my tail between my legs, and we kind of had to rethink everything. And what we kind of discovered, I mean, if you're coming from an ATV, any trail that's pretty easy to do on an ATV oftentimes isn't quite as easy to do on a side-by-side. And if you've been on a trail that's difficult on an ATV, it's even more difficult in a side-by-side. It just, we went up the Barney Lake Trail and we made it, and we did all right. We had to move a couple rocks out of the way. But man, we'd been up that trail, I couldn't even tell you, probably 20 times on ATVs. And man, we got our butt kicked. We made it, but licked our wounds when we got to the top. I would just say, when we kind of had to rethink, I don't know. I wasn't expecting as dramatic of a difference from an ATV to a side-by-side. I mean, obviously there is, but you just have to, it's a different mentality. So like I say, at that point, we put new tires on it, headed to Rally in the Pines, put about 400 miles on it up there, completely fell in love with the machine again. It just handled so much better with the new tires. The understeer was just dramatically reduced. Still has a little bit in it, but like I've said about these tires, I mean, this machine has a ton of understeer in it, which maybe was engineered into it, I don't know. And there's still just enough left with this particular tire that you don't feel like the front end is going to hook up and bite really hard and cause you to flip. But it really made the steering a lot more predictable. I gained a little bit more ground clearance, maybe 3/8 of an inch of extra ground clearance. I just totally fell in love with the machine again. I loved the way it felt. I loved the way it rode. I loved the way it drove. Yeah. So from the end of June to the end of July, everything had changed. I was back in love. I was happy again. The tires made the biggest just difference to the machine. Everything else I've done to it has been for other reasons, I suppose, but just overall in how the machine feels and drives, operates, the tires have made just the biggest change, other than the sway bar removal, obviously, but man, I can't say enough about these tires. I can't say enough times to ditch the stock crap. I think any decent aftermarket tire is going to outperform the stock one. So one thing I'd learned in my first trip down to the Paiute, I like to run with my suspension soft. I like to run low center of gravity. I like to run full soft. I want a cushy ride. I do keep my tires a bit firm. I like the tires firm so that I don't really have a lot of sidewall flex. So I run like 12 PSI in the front, 15 PSI in the rear still. I did that when I put them on, and I just haven't changed it. I like the way it feels now. So yeah, tires firm and suspension soft. But one thing I did learn at the first trip of the Paiute is I could have used a little bit more ground clearance. Trail 89 on some of those elk guards, I would drag the bottom pretty hard. I even got hung up on one. So the next time I went down, well, we went to the northern part there in August, so ground clearance wasn't too much of an issue, but I think I bumped the rear up one at that point, left the front soft. I'd also, with the weight of the box and the stuff inside of it, I figured I'd, bump the rear up one notch. Did the Paiute Trail in August, didn't have any trouble, but when we went back in September, and I knew we were going to do some of these trails for the second time, I ended up bumping the rear up 2 notches, to the second notch, from 1 to 2, and the front I bumped up 1 notch. I still rubbed some of these elk gates, but I didn't hang up on them. I didn't actually hit them, and there's just going over some rocks a little. I don't know that I gained a whole heck of a lot doing that, maybe another 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch, but it was enough that I wasn't sucking seat every time I went over a rock. Like I say, I did drag the belly a little bit on some of the gates, but not nearly as bad. But I didn't like the way it rode, but it was kind of, what are you going to do? Had to sacrifice the ride quality just a little bit to get a little bit extra ground clearance, a little more capability out of it. I have it drop back down to full soft front and rear now just because it's been sitting in the garage. Somewhere in there, I know a lot of guys like to crank them all the way up just for that extra ground clearance, maybe make room for some bigger tires. To me, it feels a little bit too stiff up there, especially the rear. The rear is stiff as a freaking board anyway on this machine, and I don't know, it just seems to make it worse. So I don't know, I guess if you know where you're going to go, you can prepare ahead of time suspension wise, but I do like to be low and slow and soft, but sometimes you got to have a little bit more ground clearance, and that does help. It does bump it up, a little bit. When you go up a notch or two, it'll give you an extra, like I say, maybe a 1/2 inch, which sometimes is just enough. The problem with this machine, and the good part about this machine, is just that really long wheelbase, that really long belly, is the breakover angle on the thing. I'll put up a video of one of these gates on Trail 89 of the Paiute that you can see your front tires are going down before your back tires are coming back up, and I would drag the belly, and in June when I was there, my brother had rented a Razor 900 following me around, and he didn't bottom out at all. He just pumping over the top of everything. So good and bad is that wheelbase. Makes some navigating some of the turns a little more difficult. You got to stop and back up and get a different run at it. But I don't know, it's worth it the other 99.9% of the time just to have the extra room in the cab, and the ride, that comes from the long wheelbase and the wheels being out at the corners. It's still a way more than fair trade-off for me. Yeah, and before we went down to that last trip to the Paiute in September, Rifab came out with the cargo rack. I'd been waiting for that, since I bought the machine. I wanted the box and I wanted the cargo rack, and finally they came out with it. Still love the cargo rack. It's so well built, so sturdy. It's just tight, literally like everything Rifab makes. It becomes a permanent part of the machine when it's bolted on. Bolts to where the roof mounts there. It's bolted to the machine there, and then there's 2 bolts down in there. I mean, the thing is just secure. It's not going anywhere. And I also added the tank mounts that Rifab makes. Now these are specific to the particular box, but basically you just take the handles off of the box and these bolt on in its place, and you buy a couple of Rotopax mounts. I went with the water tanks just because I already run a fuel tank up in front. My wife and I, talking about maybe some future plans. Next year, my wife and I want to do some overnight camping with this machine. So that's kind of where that extra rack space is going to come in handy. And with the box, I opted for the rack on top. So, I have inside the box, I have up on top of the box, I have up in the rack. The front rack, I don't know. I'm sure I'll find something that I could strap maybe here and here. But anyway, that's kind of what our thinking is. We want to do some overnight camping with this next year. So that's kind of what that is all about. I also bought the Rifab roof. If you've watched any of my videos, that Bimini roof from Can Am was just a piece of junk. And it was expensive. I think it was around $300. And I just hated it. It was plastic in the front. If you've seen it, plastic in the front and then kind of a vinyl in the back. And the plastic, when you out in the sun, the plastic would warp and it would just rattle. It always rattled. Certain RPMs, the engine would kind of transfer some vibration through the chassis, and it would just make the roof just rattle right near the back part of the plastic part. And I hated the roof, hated it. And finally Rifab come out with this roof. So I bought this the same time as I bought the rack. That's kind of where I'm at as far as modifications go. I probably missed a lot. The Rotopax tank, I have a video of how I mounted that. It's really nothing fancy. I got a 1/4-inch piece of aluminum. Anyway, mounted it down to the rack itself. I put the demolding on it just so that the Rotopax kind of has something soft to ride on. But nothing fancy. A 32-inch light bar on top. I did a video about that too. Again, nothing fancy, but it works really well. Like I say, and again, it's the same as this light up here. It's not, if you're out in the dunes, it's not going to throw enough light for something like that. But if you're just tooling along on the trails, it just puts out plenty of light. The headlights on these machines suck. They're bad. The low beams are less bad. They still suck. The high beams, they might as well not even put them in there. I did a night ride video, our Barney Lake night ride video, and in that video you can see we were tooling along, and at some point I turned that big light off and we were running with just the headlights in this one, and then I turned this one off and we were running with just the headlights, and then I ended up turning this one back on and then that one back on. You can see what a huge difference that it made. So, and I don't do a ton of night riding, so I bought these as for those occasions when we do a night ride, or there's been times we've been kind of stuck out after dark. It happens. I highly suggest you upgrade your lighting with something, whether it's that aux beam light, which I think is $18, and then another $10-12 for the harness. I think I paid $50, maybe $60 for that one, and another $12-13 for the harness for it. You don't need to spend a ton of money, and it's not going to take a lot of abuse. It's not a rigid light, but it didn't have the rigid cost either. I mean, it's more than enough light for trail riding and for what I need to do with it. We are planning a trip to Moab in March. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. We are not huge obstacle people. We never really have been. We like to cruise, and there's lots of places in Moab that we can just cruise, and that's kind of what we're planning. So don't expect anything really crazy from us on this machine, but I'm sure I'll put some video up when I get back. But I am planning a battery upgrade. I have bought the bracket to mount the 30 amp hour battery in here. I just haven't bought the battery yet, but I'll do a video of that whenever I get to that. I haven't had any trouble with this battery, and that's another thing I should say. Some people have had issues with theirs. I mean, most of the batteries that come with any factory machine are kind of hit and miss, and I've been lucky. This one's been fine. It starts the machine. It's always felt like it could use a little more oomph. I just getting the going bigger just for more cranking amps, obviously, but also just for more storage. This thing has I think it's 650 watt stator in it. It's plenty of juice to run the lights and everything, but the battery just doesn't have enough capacity that I feel comfortable with it. So yeah, a battery upgrade in the very near future. I still want to get the Can Am door bags. That'll happen soon. I don't have a whole lot left to this machine to do. I can tell you, like I said, if you're buying a machine, swap out the tires. I do highly recommend you get a winch. I mean, on any machine, you got to have a winch. If you get this thing stuck, you're not going to get it unstuck. You know, you got to have a winch. Somebody in your group needs to have a winch, and it just as well be you. You know, that's kind of number one for me. Winch, tires. I would stay away from the Can Am roofs, both the Bimini top and the full sport roof. I think they call it the plastic one. I've seen those that warp in the sun. So I don't know. Get a roof, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of the Can Am roofs. So, like I say, I think I paid $300 for my Bimini roof, and that was a waste of money. You know, I think this roof was $400, and I mean, it wasn't available at the time. I did what I had to do at the time. But now you guys are lucky you have a ton of aftermarket support out there. Just buy the right roof the first time. As far as just the machine itself, I get asked a lot if I would do it again. And I absolutely, positively, without hesitation, would do it again. I love this machine. We had our issues in the beginning. That first trip to the Paiute, you know, bottoming out on a huge rock bang and cracking the footwell and popping a tire. I came home and I kind of started to question my purchase. But since then, a few modifications later, and just learning the machine, things like that, I'm so happy with it. I would do it again. Highly recommend this machine. I say just put some different tires on it. Go over it good. You know, check for. And I think a lot of the dealers now are aware of the issues that they've had with the wiring harness and spark plug wire. I think, you know, just dumb stuff like that. I think they've corrected those issues. So you should be good. But you always want to give it a good looking over for bolts missing, bolts tight, things like that. But, you know, I do want to say this machine, I've had zero issues. It starts every time I turn the key. It's taken me out in some pretty remote places that, you know, always make you nervous. But, I have confidence in the machine. I would do it again. Very happy, and I recommend this machine. You know, if you're in the market, if you're still on the fence, just do it. 133 miles in one day is our record, and it's comfortable. It's doable. The seats are great. They don't look like much, but they really are comfortable. I think the longest day we ever did on an ATV was around 96, 97 miles. And you do a 96, 97 mile on an ATV and you're beat to crap. I mean, you're beat up. And it's just not the case in a side-by-side. You just don't feel nearly as beat up after 100 miles. I guess that's it. I thought I had a lot to talk about. I guess I talked about a lot. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, you know, in the comments below. If I forgot anything, I'm sorry. but I just kind of wanted to get this done. It's been a long time in the making, and just haven't had time to do it. Finally got some space in the garage. The garage is clean. Cars are outside. Finally had a minute to get this done. So anyway, I appreciate everyone watching again. I appreciate the subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, click the button. Follow the journey, follow the build, follow, like the evolution of this machine, and like the video if you like it, and appreciate it. Again, I appreciate you watching, and we will see y'all in the next video.